Now, please welcome the Honorable Don Beyer, Congressman from the 8th District of Virginia, in conversation with Jenilee Keefe Singer, Senior Director for Government Affairs at the Special Competitive Studies Project.
Congressman Beyer, thank you so much for joining us. I do want to address, I'm sure you saw that Congressman Neil Dunn's name was on the screen. Unfortunately, he could not join us today. His district is awaiting a hurricane, unfortunately. He sends his regrets, but we are so happy to have you here for this conversation, and we hope that he and his constituents are left with safety.
I'm afraid to be here without Neil.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, he's a very good guy, and a Republican and a urologist, and very good on AI. So
Yes.
I'm sorry you're going to miss him. So
That's okay. We're here today to have a great conversation.
yeah, absolutely.
So you are on House Ways and Means. You are on the Joint Economic Committee, and you are on a number of caucuses that are related to AI and energy. You're on the House AI Task Force. You're vice chair of the House AI Caucus, and you co-founded the House Fusion Caucus. So with that as a framing,
Is that nerdy enough for you?
Is that enough? I don't know.
Is that nerdy enough for you?
I don't know. I work for SCSP, so we're pretty nerdy. Yeah, that's how we are. What draws you to the tech and energy world? Why AI plus energy?
Well, I think I was attracted for two different reasons. Attracted to the AI world because the mathematics is just so fascinating. For decades, I've been intrigued with the idea that we're generating so much more information than we can possibly use, that it's just too much. You know, it's a throwaway factoid, but supposedly true, that we generated more information last year than in the first 2,000 years of the modern era. And so 88% of the data we download every day from satellites, we never look at. So the notion of having mathematical tools and computers strong enough, fast enough to be able to see correlations and even causations and what that can do for just life on Earth, how long we're going to live, et cetera. And then on the other hand, there's climate change, which is our 21st century existential risk. Mm-hmm. And you put the two of those together, they reinforce each other. Hopefully they will lead to a much better future.
You talk about climate change. Virginia has been putting a lot of investment into sustainable energy sources. And what do you see as the role of the federal government in trying to propel alternative energy sources forward? Obviously, there's been legislation in that direction, but what is the USG role?
Well, I think it's huge. I mean, federal government should not be expected to do it all. We're a catalyst, but the Inflation Reduction Act of August, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago now, was, the most important environmental bill in the history of humankind. And it's doing a lot. I mean, they were having explosive growth in solar and wind and geothermal. Bob Lou was just here talking about the offshore stuff that's happening off Virginia. My particular, we try to get involved in everything, but the part I've been most involved with is using the federal government as a catalyst for the wonderful private efforts on fusion energy. There are now 40 fusion energy companies around the country, and some more around the rest of the world, and many of them are on the cusp of doing making fusion energy on the grid. Cusp, maybe I should say, not tomorrow, but not 50 years from now, as we've expected.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit more about fusion energy and other work that really could be catalyzed by that public-private partnership. Obviously, Virginia is home to great universities and national labs and offices, and has a huge tech corridor now. So how do they all work together to move that forward?
I think you hit exactly the right idea, that everything's reinforcing everything else. For example, back to fusion for just 1 second, there's the two big fusion deals are either magnetic confinement with a tokamak or stellarator, but we're using fusion energy to figure out how the plasma works inside of that. It's been a huge problem, and AI is what's allowing us to move forward. Similarly, we met yesterday with some of the people that are trying to replicate the Lawrence Livermore National Ignition Facility, which is lasers hitting a little target. How do they get the laser to hit something that pulses 15 times a second? They use artificial intelligence to do that. So those things work together in really important ways. But we talk about data centers. You've had Dominion up here. So Northern Virginia is the home to apparently 2/3 of the data centers in the world are right there, with all the political feedback from that. So we're running out of land, we're running out of water. Bob Blue needs twice as much energy in 2050 as he did, 2 to 5 years ago. And so using artificial intelligence to have ever better chips, to make those data centers ever more efficient in the energy that they use is phenomenally important.
You mentioned chips, you mentioned energy, we're talking about AI. Can't mention those things without talking about global competition and keeping the U.S. ahead. What do you think the U.S. can do but from the government side and collectively with all those public-private partnerships to help the U.S. maintain leadership?
Once again, there's probably 100 things we need to do. The one that's the most obvious was the Chips and Science Act, that making this enormous, basically the first industrial policy in my lifetime, where we have said government's going to weigh in, make some choices, and fund these factories, move TMSC, TSMC here from Taiwan and to Arizona, et cetera. Things that are popping up all over the country. So that'll be a big part of it. But also just everything else that we're doing in the various pieces of legislation encourages different types of energy formation and an ever greater commitment educationally to getting the people who can work in those fields, with or without higher education. One of the reasons Amazon located in Northern Virginia was because they said no other similar area in the country generated as many math and science undergraduates as Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax Lab, et cetera. And so we need to just keep investing in that. The better our schools, the better our universities, the more likely we're going to be able to dominate.
Absolutely. You talk about education. I can't sit next to you without asking you about your continued education. For those who don't know, Congressman Beyer has been getting a master's degree part-time in machine learning. I did school part-time at night, and I was not a member of Congress. So I would love to know how you had the free time for time management skills for all of us, but what drove you to that pursuit of education at this juncture?
Well, it was just, curiosity. I mean, I was always trying to stay up. I mean, one of the wonderful parts about Congress is every day is a massive learning experience. Just the people you get to talk to all day long. But I figured not knowing how to code, not knowing linear algebra, being fascinated by machine learning and not knowing how to do it, I should go back and try. I don't think anyone's ever going to hire me as a coder, but it has given me the ability to be in the conversation on the larger public policy issues, to be able to know those task forces you mentioned. Yeah.
And, part of this larger conversation and shift in AI and energy is needing that workforce for the future. How do we make sure that as AI changes the energy world and other sectors that we have the workers where we are helping those of today have a just transition, but also prepare the workers for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think that comes back to immigration policy first and foremost. We look at our U.S. birth rate. Well, the birth rate of virtually most of the countries of the world. South Carolina or South Korea is the worst. Downtown Seoul is that less than 8/10 baby per eligible woman per year or something crazy. So we need to do the best we can with the kids that are born here, and then look really seriously at lots more legal immigration for the people from all over the world who would love to come here to study and to work.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think we do for those who are here already? How do we ensure that kids who are in school right now are prepared for the future?
I think the biggest thing would be to make science and engineering and things like computer science exciting. I find that some of the schools that have the best computer scientists are also the ones that have the best robotics programs. If you have a robotics program, there's a reason to learn how to do all that. And fun, and you're with boys and girls and your trips. But if it's just boring stuff, then why do you want to do it? So anything we can do, in fact, when I finally get done with Congress and I get beaten in a primary, I want to start writing video games that teach kids about math and science in a way that's storytelling, because we all love stories.
And I know video games are a direct way to my kid's heart. So that's a great idea. I do want to sort of shift gears for everyone in the room and leave an opportunity for all of you to ask questions. So we do have 2 individuals in the room with roving mics. So if there's anyone who has a question for Congressman Beyer, he is very graciously open to hearing what you want to ask him.
And we can't see any of you anyway,
no.
so
It's like
it's safe.
it's safe.
Yep.
Yes, there's a right here in the center. That's Ina making her way. Thank you. And if you could let us know like who you are, that would be wonderful.
Hello, my name is Giancarla. Actually, you used to be my former boss, and so I was happy to see you. I'm a nuclear energy advocate, and my question for you is, how can I be a better messenger? Because I did my master's in Georgetown, and my focus was artificial intelligence, and that dropped the conversation about the nuclear energy and the demand for energy. So now I am trying to discuss this with climate activists, with people that don't believe in climate crisis, to my own community, my immigrant community. So how can I be a better messenger in terms of how to advocate for more energy demand on a clean energy demand? Thank you.
I didn't get all that question. Is it how can you be a better messenger
Yeah.
to your community? Yeah.
I think that was bottom line.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
okay. The only small wisdom I can offer keeps showing up, that the more often that you can be in front of any and every group to be able to talk about the things that you're excited about. The only time I ever quote George Will is he said that people tend to believe that which is most fervently believed. So if you're out there carrying your message about how excited you are about these different forms of energy and how your background puts it together, then I think you inspire other people to want to do it too. And by the way, one of my most treasured pieces of wisdom is to accept every invitation, because nothing happens at home. You never remember the night you watch TV or made lasagna. But if you're out every night talking to people about what you just talked about, the things that you really believe in, you will bring more people to you, especially inspire people in your own communities.
Sort of a follow-up to that, how do you get your constituents and others to pay more attention to the AI revolution and the energy revolution? How do you get people who they're worrying about other things in their lives to really pay attention and to learn about it more?
Well, so much of it is invisible in people's lives, or we quickly take it for granted. Whether we're working, the things we can order on the internet with a one click or on our phones, or the way we're able to get much more security. But on the other hand, a lot of it, I think, is teaching people how to use the newest forms of artificial intelligence that they can actually use, that are not just part of the landscape. Finland, apparently, I've not seen it yet, did a 20-hour series on YouTube broken into 50-minute segments that some whopping percentage of the Finnish adult population has watched, that says, here's how you use GPT-4 or the Google version or the Microsoft version. Now, OpenAI, I believe just last week, came out with, I think it's called Strawberry.
Yeah, one strawberry.
One strawberry,
yeah.
Which apparently is the next step in delivering explainability to the AI processes, which is really exciting, because when you don't know, based on the large neural networks, when you don't know why you're getting an answer, it's scary. But if it can take it to the next level and provide the steps involved, it's very exciting. And already, and one of the throwaway statistics is when you do a conversation with GPT-4, you're using 10 times as much energy as a Google search. However, while that's a disadvantage, on the advantage side, you may get a lot more out of the conversation than you do out of Google search.
Does anyone else have questions? While you're right here in the front. Oh, you have one back there? Okay, we'll take that right there because you're close. Ina, if you want to come this way next.
Hi. Keefe with Center for AI Policy. And I've worked with your office, Congressman, quite a bit. But I was just wondering how you anticipate, as you were referring to, getting folks who actually have, the wherewithal to be compensated to come work in Congress or in agencies, as opposed to going to, go to the labs. Since you are very knowledgeable about this.
Yeah, that's a very good and hard question. There have been certain carve-outs already, but I think we're going to have to address that head on, because if you can go to Silicon Valley or San Francisco or Northern Virginia and make 4 or 5 times what a GS-16 makes, it's tough. I have wonderful Jason Lang over here who left San Francisco to be a tech fellow, but he only committed for 1 year. So we figure when the year's up, he's going to go back and make a lot more money. So we have to embrace that, because we don't want the people who wouldn't thrive in a competitive, high-tech, high-energy environment to be who are making national policy. We want the best and brightest here too.
Absolutely. I know we have a question out here, and I think we got another question over here for next right there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hannah Rosenberg. I'm a fellow with a venture fund out of San Francisco. My question for you is, you mentioned that you went back to school, or I guess you're still in school, and it's helped made you more knowledgeable in some of the conversations that you've been having. Give a specific example of how the knowledge that you gained from your additional master's degree has changed the way that you looked at a policy compared to one of your colleagues who can't.
Yeah, although I don't know that it gives me a huge advantage. I think the greater advantage is being willing to read all the different papers, and there's just a deluge of really interesting things being written, probably by many of the people in this room, about AI policy in different ways. It's nice to be able to understand, at least a little bit, how the machines work, but I don't know that that's the most important difference. When I look at some of the people that I think are superstars in this, Ben Buchanan at the White House, Elizabeth Kelly out at NIST, I don't think they're computer programmers. They're just really smart people that understand how the limits on AI exist, what's the light touch regulation that most Americans want, but enough to make sure that our safety is preserved. But for me, a lot of it is just fun. It's a lot better than doing Sudoku or playing bridge. There's some meaning at the end of the day.
Thank you. I think you had a question right there.
How you doing? Good. So I'm Aldo Mishan. I'm a student at George Mason University. First of all, I'd like to thank you for representing my district, because I'm also from that district. You touched a little bit the education, especially in Northern Virginia area. We also touched a little bit about the national security that we're on right now. How do you think that our state or even our nation can contribute to the education system by contributing monetary funds for us students to have those tools that we need in order to be successful? Because right now AI is really advancing rapidly, right? So me as a student, I don't think I have the right tools from the school, to make those advancements or actually that progress, to be ahead of, other students from other nations. Like, how can we address the issue, or like, what can we do as a state, for us to be successful?
There are probably 18 insufficient answers. Let me give you 3 insufficient answers. Number one is we can hold down the cost of college tuitions. The fact that college tuitions have risen so much faster than inflation or virtually any other thing in America, way more than groceries, for example. That's really important. I paid $4,000 tuition, room and board when I went. Now it's $80,000 for any of the top 50 private schools. So that's number one. Number two is to realize that so much computer science, all you need is a laptop. Most of the stuff that I'm doing right now is, a laptop is just fine. But then the third part is, how do we have access to the kinds of big data centers that OpenAI has at Anthropic? There's a bill that's passed out of the Science Committee I'm a co-lead with a number of other great bipartisan people, called the Create AI Act, that would actually stand up, the National Science Foundation stand up the big data neural models to compete with the private sector, smaller because we're actually trying to allow for gender bias, race bias. You know, when Sam Altman says that for GPT-4, he scraped all 6 trillion words off the internet, you know that 40% of those words are wrong, you know, or just evil or incorrect. So a curated large language model that's available to students, academics, businesses, small, medium-sized businesses, gives another tool for us all to participate in the AI revolution.
Great. Any other questions in the audience? There's one over there. I'm going to ask one question and hand over to you. You mentioned the National AI Research Resource, which would provide an opportunity for individuals, smaller universities, smaller companies to gain access to data and compute power. What do you think that could do for the energy community?
Yeah, there's, I don't even know where to start. Let me just start with transmission. I talked to a number of people involved in transmission, which I'm not an expert, but we've been tending to think of it as just a permitting problem. You know, where can we build the new lines? Bob Liu talked about how people don't like power lines in their neighborhood. There's also what's happening at the transformers. How can we get more electricity on the same lines that we have right now? And I think artificial intelligence can give us a lot more understanding of ways that power can be transmitted. When the throwaway stat is that we have more solar, wind, geothermal ready to go on the grid than is on the grid right now. So if we can find ways to use the existing grid a whole lot better while we build it out, that will help. But then you just sort of go back every step of the way. One of the big things we did in the Inflation Reduction Act, for example, is huge tax incentives for putting solar panels on your home or geothermal or a new heat pump. All those are using technology to be much more efficient. We just put a new heat pump in our house replacing the oil burner that was there. And you know, expensive in the short run, less expensive because of the tax credits, and a huge benefit down the road because a lot less power burned for the BTUs we get.
Absolutely. Yeah, love to take your question.
Hi, Congressman Beyer. Thank you so much for being here and for engaging so thoroughly with the technical side. My name is Daniel King. I'm a machine learning grad student at Yale University. And my question for you is, do you have a favorite professor at school, and who was it?
It's the one I have right now, who's going to grade my midterm in 2 weeks. Yeah. But he's very good. He's a Professor Otten, O-T-T-E, and he explains things really well. Plus, he's interesting. He's a computer science professor, and he said, if I see any laptops or phones, you're out of here. He wants us to take handwritten notes because he thinks we learn best that way.
We'll make sure after this to clip that plug to send it to him without the part about the laptops.
Oh, okay.
So we're good.
Well, no,
we'll help you out.
Okay.
Right. I do. If there's anyone else with questions, I'd love to get them. But I do have one question for you. Obviously, you represent Northern Virginia. Virginia is home to a number of military installations and the Pentagon. And when you think about AI and security and energy and security, one of the first things that comes to mind for me is our national grid and protecting our military installations. How do you think the U.S. can better prepare itself for creating an environment where we both are protecting our military through energy and AI and protecting our grid? I know that's kind of two topics, but all in the bubble of security.
And it all comes back to, I think, the huge challenge that we have at Homeland Security. You know, Secretary Mayorkas and people like that are involved in that, because it's protecting our energy grid, but it's also protecting our water supplies and our roads and just what happens with the next pandemic. Now, one of the things that's most intriguing about artificial intelligence is trying to think about the downsides. Mm-hmm. For example, in the National Defense Authorization Act, there is an amendment in the House version that says you can't use artificial intelligence to launch a nuclear weapon. there has to be a human agent. It's got to be the president, et cetera. Well, that notion of human agency goes to a lot of other pieces. So how do we use artificial intelligence? Well, let me give a great example is, I think anyone involved in technology has got to be afraid of the impact of an EMP, electromagnetic pulse, on everything that's going on. How do we harden our systems, and how do we use AI to make sure that our systems are protected from that?
Thank you. Any other question? Like hard. All right.
Chit?
Yep. Yeah. In the back. You're welcome. I read your mind.
Jenelee's waiting for the clock to tick down up here.
No. I'm enjoying our time together.
We've got one more, Jenilee.
You have one question? All right.
All right. Hi, Congressman Beyer. My name's Hayden Parham. I'm a graduate student at Johns Hopkins. So you're actually my congressman. I live in Virginia 8. I grew up in Virginia 10. Whenever I talk to my parents or neighbors, the data centers, they're a big issue, right? And we talked a little bit in the previous panel about kind of the differing interests. I think it's very easy in DC to recognize the needs, that there's a massive shortage, that we need to bring it up. But there's NIMBYism. There's a lot of people who don't want them. They're big, they're ugly, they're what have you. As a congressman in this area, you have to be very sensitive to constituents. How are you finding you're able to navigate these sort of differing interests, meeting our national security needs, meeting our energy needs, while also being kind of sensitive to these preferences?
Having all these Yale and Johns Hopkins graduate students making me insecure up here. Well, first of all, I'm really glad I'm not in local office, because then you're under the gun 24 hours a day. That's going to be a very difficult local issue on an ongoing basis, and state to a lesser extent. I was with the Prince William County supervisor last night. The guy whose last name is Angry, Mr. Angry. He just talked about, on the one hand, the data centers are producing an enormous amount of revenue for local government. I hear in Loudoun County, it's a third of the revenue is coming from the data centers, and they require no police and no schools and no fire, and it's pretty cool from a local government standpoint. On the other hand, people don't like the noise, they don't like the sterility of the buildings. They're afraid the environmental impacts is gobbling up water. Again, at Bob Blue, so you can trust him as the head of Dominion, he said the average property tax bill in Loudoun would go up $2,000 per person without the data centers. So it's the balance that we have everywhere in life, and especially in leadership. I live in the city of Alexandria. We're not at risk, but the big challenge right now in Fairfax is they're talking, I think one has just gotten the permitting approved in basically Bailey's Crossroads, Mason Congressional District. That's a pretty dense area. We'll see how that plays out.
I know we are out of time, but I do want to ask you a really important question is, since we talked about negatives, what makes you most excited about AI and energy? I always like to end on a positive note. What makes you really excited?
Well, I'm a broken record on fusion, so I apologize, but we visited Commonwealth Fusion last week outside Boston. This is the MIT spinoff, and they're going to turn on their first fusion reactor in 2026. That's not 2036 or 2046, it's 2026. And then put tritium in 2027. We're going to see burning plasma. Helion has contracts with Nucor Steel and with Microsoft to deliver fusion energy in 2028. We're going to still be young and healthy. So that's going to be, you start making energy from seawater with no radioactive waste on plant sizes the size of a tennis court. That's the energy transformation. It's not just the next energy source, it's the last energy source. And AI will make that happen.
Wonderful. I love ending on optimism. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenilee.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.